Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laura Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 7:30 a.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. I'm glad to be here. I didn't schedule my show, so it came on at 6 o'clock, so I had to reschedule. So sorry about that for anybody who was waiting here. I want to continue talking about what we're talking about, positive affirmations from Robert Burney's webpage, Joy to Me and You, and he's got some great stuff there, and hopefully everybody's getting something out of this. And I'm glad to be able to do these shows. I thank everybody for tuning in. You know, I'm not a counselor or therapist, and I'm just a private citizen, paying to do my own blog talk shows. And so you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and very sensitive subject. A lot of people may find it makes them uncomfortable. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and ultimately it is your discretion to listen. So make sure that it's something that you're okay with. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show. Mainly because there's a lot of, mature adult content on my shows, and even though it's all about stopping child abuse, it's a sensitive topic, and if you're under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not. And thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. We're going to get right into this. And Robert Burney, his website, www.joy2meyou, that's joy, the number 2, meu.com. He's got some great stuff there. If you go to the site index, you can see all of his work that he's written in many web pages. Lots of stuff on codependency, relationship issues, boundary work, inner child work, whatnot. He's a codependence therapist, Robert Burney, Burny. He is a grief counselor. He's an author. He's written a book, Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls, and he's a spiritual teacher. So a lot of his stuff is very spiritual, and actually I would say almost all of it. Sort of a different take on things. I know, like I was saying on the show yesterday, John Bradshaw, he's got some great stuff too about codependence and shame and toxic shame and whatnot. But and it's awesome too. And he wrote a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. I'd like to get a hold of that one too. There's quite a few books I'd like to get a hold of. So this is what we're going to finish talking about here this morning. Positive affirmations, and sort of get right back into that. So Robert Burney says, that we need to turn down the volume on those loud, yammering voices that shame and judge us, and turn up the volume on the quiet, loving voice. And he says, as long as we're judging and shaming ourselves, we are feeding back into the disease. So we're feeding the dragon within that is eating the life out of us. And that's from his book, an excerpt from his book. And he said about himself, he says, the critical parent voice in my head has always berated me for not being perfect, for being human. And he says, my expectations, the shoulds, my disease piled on me, were a way in which I victimized myself. I was always judging, shaming, and beating myself up because as a little child I got the message something was wrong with me. So he says, there is nothing wrong with me or you. It is our relationship with ourselves and life that is dysfunctional. And we are spiritual beings who came into body in an emotionally dishonest, spiritually hostile environment where everyone was trying to do human according to false belief systems. We were taught to expect life to be something that it isn't, and it isn't our fault that things are so screwed up. It is, however, our responsibility to change the things we can within ourselves. And he says, quote unquote, I need to learn how to set boundaries within, both emotionally and mentally, by integrating spiritual truth into my process. Because I feel like a failure does not mean that is the truth. The spiritual truth is that the failure is an opportunity for growth. So that's what he's written there. Quite interesting. I mean, when you think about it, because we have these critical, parent voices, these shaming voices, judging voices within us. Many people do, not everyone probably, but a lot of people do. That's that's quite often will tell me, oh, you can't do anything right, especially if I make a mistake or something. If I do something wrong, especially at work, where it really counts, or in a relationship, where it really counts and matters. And I say to myself, I have this inner parent, inner critical voice saying to me, you can't do anything right, because I was told that as a child. That doesn't mean that's true. Just because that voice is yammering at me that I can't do anything right, I don't have to believe that, because that's not true. There are many things that I can do right. I do make mistakes, and that's where that opportunity for growth comes in. So I like what Robert Burney has to say about that, and I think that's very true. It does make sense to me. And for instance, the things that my mother would tell me that really hurt me, that sort of stayed with me, was things like, I was a whore and a slut and all this. And I was a small child when she started telling me that. And she was just using those words to hurt me. She was, it's obvious that, at a young age of even under 10 years old, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I was not a slut and I was not a whore. Didn't even know what those words meant. And I just knew that the context that she was saying them in was hurtful because of the way she was saying them, and she was quite often dishing out a beating at the same time. So I knew the point she was trying to make was that she was trying to hurt me. And so, obviously that was not true. Just because she said it, and just because that inner, parent voice, says that to me, doesn't mean that I have to believe that, because it's completely untrue. And so, we have to, tune those voices out. We have to listen to our inner voice, a loving voice. We have to allow ourselves to find that within us and say, I'm not a bad person, or I can do things right. We have to completely change that around and stop believing that critical, shaming voice, right? Whatever it is, that's telling us these things that are just not true. And we know they're not true, and yet for some reason we allow that to, a lot of people allow those types of things to bring them down. I know that used to bring me down quite a bit, was just having this inner critical voice just continually running me down, so I'd hear it all the time. So now, for the last 4 years since I've been on my healing journey, I've really been doing a lot of work, obviously, and those voices don't, they don't pop in there very often. And when they do, I don't pay much attention to them. I'm just kind of like, whatever, I'm not listening to that, because I know that that's not true. I am a good person. I'm trying. I'm doing the best I can. And I'm going to make mistakes, There will be people that will be disappointed with me. And there will always be someone in life who will not like what I'm doing. Not everybody's going to like what I'm doing or like me as a person. That's fine. But I have to be comfortable with myself, And I think that's the big thing. We have to love ourselves. We have to be comfortable in our own skin. And that was I was talking about this not too long ago, probably about a week or two ago, where I was just saying, even today I have a hard time. I have a better time now than I ever have, but I still have issues of being comfortable in my own skin, in my own place, in my own world, in my own, even in my own apartment, And a person, you should be able to relax in your own apartment. You would think that a person, a 45, 46-year-old person should be able to relax in their own space with their own, in their own apartment or their own house. And I mean, it doesn't matter where I'm at, I feel sort of the same all the time, nervous, anxious. And it has everything to do with how I was brought up, and the tension and the fear and the garbage that was put on me as a child. People would think, how can that possibly affect you now? And it's just the fact that, you spend enough years in that poisonous, toxic state. It's going to, sometimes affect people for a long, long time. So what I'm working on is learning how to feel comfortable, which is all part of loving myself and allowing myself to just be me, and allow myself to exist within this world that I'm creating for myself, and to not make all my decisions based on fear-driven decisions, and to really try to relax and allow myself to just live and just experience life and look for the good things, And I think we do create our own worlds. We really do. I mean, my parents created my world when I was young. They created this hellhole of an existence. I call it a hellhole because it really was for a young child. There wasn't anything positive going on. And even when the positive stuff was sort of going on, which would be like Christmas time and, there would be gifts under the tree and stuff, there was always tension. There was always fights breaking out between my parents. We couldn't even have a Christmas holiday with any kind of goodness or any kind of peace or anything like that in the home, because my parents fought, all the time. So it didn't matter what was happening. And, so we would still have Christmas. We would still open our gifts, but in the midst of, my mother screaming at my father, my dad, screaming at my mom, dishes being broken, people getting hurt. And, and of course there I am with my gift thinking, oh, this is great, And in the meantime, in the background, knowing the situation, it was very disturbing. It was a horrible existence, and no child should ever have to be brought up in that. And we know so many people are. That's why I say my story is not special. It's just one more. And so, I have to now, as an adult, it is my responsibility to create my own world. And I have to create it the way, the I want to create it the best way that I can, which would be, filled with good stuff, And so what I have to do is go back and change the way that I feel about myself in order to do that. Because, I could be having, I could have all the money in the world, but I'm still stuck with me, I could have the best, job in the whole world, but I'm still stuck with me, right? I've had great jobs, but I'm still stuck with me. And so it's my relationship to the world that is damaged, and the reason being is because my relationship with myself is damaged. So if I'm, as long as I'm comfortable with my situation and whatever relationships I have out there in the world, should go pretty good, you would think, right? And so, but it's a matter of me being comfortable with me being okay with myself, and that's a huge issue, and for a lot of people. And so that's what I'm working on, is really being comfortable in my own skin and being comfortable in this life that I'm creating for myself, and it's something that I've had to really spend time on, and it doesn't happen overnight, and I'm really working through it. But I think it's very important, these positive affirmations. And he says here, we can tell ourselves things like, the entire universe loves me. He mentions a whole bunch here. And when you go to this webpage, you can see there's a lot. There's even a whole bunch off to the left side of the webpage. There's just a whole lot. The entire universe loves me, serves me, nurtures me, and wants me to win. We can say things like, I am a success to the degree that I feel warm and loving to myself. And another one is, my debts represent me and others' beliefs in my future earning ability. So I can even say that my debts right now are just the don't really matter, because my future earning ability will take care of those debts, right? Sort of just changing the negative to the positives, right? My value and worth are increased by everything I do. I like that one. The most important thing to my loved one's happiness is that I be happy first. That's a very important issue. That's like, nobody could be happy in my home because my mother, and especially my mother, because nobody cared about my dad, which is really true, very sad, but none of the siblings actually cared about my dad all that much because of the type of man he was. And he wasn't a good father, and he wasn't a good husband. He was just not a good man. But my mother, we all cared about my mother, and we could see what was happening to her. And all of us used to talk about it, and we'd be like, we just want Mom to be happy. We just want Mom to be happy. And I would even say stuff like to her. I'd be like, we just want you to be happy, Mom. We just want you to be happy. Especially when she was, down and talking about suicide and stuff, And that just never mattered to her, that her children wanted her to be happy. She was still the abusive woman that she was. She was still dishing out the beatings. She was still cursing. She was still rampaging and raging, at her existence and taking it out on us, right? Even though she knew, because we were telling her to her face that we wanted her to be happy, and she could never be happy. Excuse me, my voice is terrible this morning. And so she could never be happy. And so that always bothered me, because I thought, you can't even try. Like, she wouldn't even try for her own children's sake to be happy. And it used to bother me. And actually, I became very bitter about it. And then later on in life, it went pretty much what happened, before I moved up to Canada. I talk about it in Life of Death or Redemption, is we had a little bit of a spat, like a fighting, not a fight, but we had an argument. I was really tired of listening to my parents cursing each other and their sexual dysfunction, and listening to them talking about their sexual problems, and they were just gross and disgusting, and they didn't mind if the whole world knew their problems. They could be in the middle of a restaurant doing that, and they were starting to get violent. My mother was very sick, so she had just had a stroke and broke her hip and had surgery, and wasn't walking well, and the dog, her lifespan was looking pretty slim. Her chances of surviving another year or two at that point, and I was quite upset because they were starting to fight again, and I told them off. I was like, you guys listen to yourselves, right? So, this is ridiculous, and I actually threw a fit, and so then my mother didn't like my attitude and got mad, and here I am, 28 years old, and so I was talking to her afterward, and I told her, I said, you've got to be happy about something. There has to be something that brings you joy in this world, something that brings you peace, something that makes this worthwhile, And she just told me, no, there's nothing. I said, well, what about your children? I said, your children love you very much, and we all loved you. So I went through and I named us all off, Irene, Kevin, Chesley, Rob, Howard, Kathy, myself. We all loved you very much. And we cared about you, and we do, and the ones that are here still care about you. And she said, all of you were not worth anything to me. You were worth nothing to me. And at that point I thought, this is a woman who has allowed herself to become so down. She wouldn't even try to have a different outlook. She wouldn't even try to love her children. That just made me sick to my stomach. I was like, you know what? I am gone. I'm out of here. I left within a few short months, and I was gone, 2,000 miles away. I thought, no way am I going to stick around for any more of this garbage. That's absolutely ridiculous. But this is what people will do to another person. This is what people will do to each other. And survivors have to be very careful, because we will do that to other people and expect them to stick around. We will negate their worth all because we have no worth. It's like, well, if I have no self-worth and I don't believe in myself, how can I believe in anybody else? If I don't have any self-worth and I don't have any love for myself in my heart or love for this life, how can I possibly love anybody else or show any kind of love for anything in this world? And a world without love is a pretty sad, dark place. And so, we have to learn how to feel that we are worth it, that the life is worth it, and people around us are worth it. And we have to incorporate good people into our life. That's another thing. It's a very serious issue. It is completely our choice who we have around us, and we don't have to tolerate what we don't want. So it's important to make those choices. We have to make the right choices, and we have to be very careful how we're going to approach people and how we're going to approach things. You'd never tell your children, you're not worth anything to me. You don't matter. You don't count. I wish you were never born. You don't tell your children that. And my mother told me that from the day I was born, right? And then, I'm expected to pull it together, As a child, I'm expected to understand, when I'm really just wanting love and care and affection and wanting her to see me as a worthy being, and that I did deserve to be alive, and that I did matter and I did count. And so many people, I'm sure, are made to feel this way. And it's sad that people will do that. They will hurt another person, especially their children or their family, and they will do it on purpose. Like my mother, people would say, "Oh, she was mentally ill. How could she have possibly helped herself? She was manic depressive. She was abused as a child. So there was every reason for her behavior." But the issues are the issues, and the blame goes where it goes. And we cannot, as adult survivors of child abuse, go on to repeat this garbage. We have to find something that's worth it. We have to find, I make it a point to let everybody know in my life that means that really is good to me and actually cares about me and really is here for me, that they are worth it, and they do matter and they do count. And even my dysfunctional family that I don't talk to anymore, I've cut them off. It doesn't mean I hate them. I love my family, and I love my sister, I love my brother. I can't deal with their toxicity. It drags me down to the place where I'm trying to get away from, which is that place I was as a child. They want me to play that script. They want me to play that role, and I refuse to do it anymore, so therefore, what can you do? But I still love them, you know what I mean? And that's because that's my choice. I choose to love them. See, my mother made the wrong choice. Right? She should have never told me that. She should have never felt that. She should have never allowed herself to feel that her children were worth nothing and that her life was worth nothing. But she did. She made the wrong choice for herself, and she made the wrong choice for her children. And so, what she could have done was say, even though this is not the life that I would have chosen for myself, and even though, it's been a hard road with my, being abused as a child and then ending up in this marriage that was just disgraceful, I still love my children, and she could have made a point to let us all know that, but she couldn't, because it wasn't true. So I got the truth from her, you know what I mean, always. And that's one thing I can say about my mother, is that she was consistently honest. She didn't sit there one day saying, "Oh, I love you," and the next day, "I hate you." She wasn't wishy-washy. She didn't sit there and say, one day, "I'm so glad you're born, and you're a great child," and then the next day, "I hate you," or, "I never should have had you," or "You should have been born dead," or whatever. My mother was just flat out consistent that she didn't want us. We were not wanted. She didn't care about us. She hated me because I was born out of rape, and that I never should have been born, and that I was supposed to be dead with all the stillborn babies. I talk about this a lot, but that's because that's how harsh of a reality of that's what I want people to see, the truth of what abusers will do to their children. And it's like, that's horrible. You don't tell your children that, but my mother was really happy when she told me that. It let her get out her frustrations. I was just her punching bag. I was her physical and verbal, emotional, psychological punching bag. You know what I mean? And that's really sad, but that's the way it is, right? Now I have to say to myself, you know what? It doesn't matter what my mother thought about me. It doesn't matter what my family thinks about me today. The rest of my dysfunctional family. There's not very many of us left, but the few that are here. It doesn't matter to me what they think. And that's what gets me through the day. If I actually cared what they thought, I'd be miserable because I know what they think. I've heard it from their lips. I mean, I know exactly what they think, and that's I'll never be able to change their mind. They will always feel the same way about me. They're never going to see me as a successful person. They see me as this punk kid who needed to have this abuse put on me. You know what I mean? Because I was a bad child, right? In their eyes, in their mind, because of what they saw my mother doing to me and how my mother was treating me, in their eyes, I was that bad child. I was the child in the corner who needed my ass kicked, right? I was the child who was bad and needed to be pummeled and slapped around and told off and beaten with belts and kicked around the room. That's the child that I was. That's to them, that's what I deserved, right? Now, no child deserves that, especially when a child loves their parents, like I loved my parents, and they knew that. I used to tell them I loved them, but they wouldn't tell me they loved me back. And finally, I got tired of saying I loved them because I wasn't getting any response back from them, and I got mad. And I said, "Why do you not tell me you love me? Why do you say that you don't love me? I'm telling you I love you." And my dad actually one time told me, "I don't have to tell you I love you. I don't have to tell you much." I was like, "Okay, whatever." You know what I mean? Like I actually stopped saying it. I was like, "You know what? That's fine. I'll think it." But so I mean, for a long time I thought I hated them. They turned me into a hateful child. So, I mean, I thought I hated them, but then I realized actually I didn't hate them. I just hated what they were doing, and I hated the lifestyle that they presented and actually put before us to live out. But I didn't hate them, I love my family very much, but they'll never see me in the light that they need to see me in, which would be the realistic light, which is, hey, I'm doing good, and I'm working on my healing journey, and I'm not perfect, that's for sure, but I'm also not a bad person. I don't go around wishing bad things on people. And, trying to hurt people. I'm trying to make my way in this world. But I'll never get that. They'll never change the way that they feel about me, right? They still feel the same way about my brothers, too. And they say the harshest stuff about my brothers who have passed on and they're dead now. And they say things like, they were just losers. That's what they get. That's that they made their bed, they lie in it. You know what I mean? Instead of, thinking about my brothers as the person that they were. Sure, they were having problems, and they were drug addicts, and they were, in trouble all the time with the law, and they were getting in trouble. They're not taking a look at the situation and saying, well, how come and why? Why did they go that route? And why were they not able to accept love, and why were they not able to even love themselves? But in my dysfunctional family, what kind of answers are you going to get from them? You know what I mean? So that's why I don't hang around with them. They're just way too toxic and way too stuck in that garbage. So that's what I decided to do, was change the way I felt about myself. And I said, it doesn't matter to me what anybody thinks. It doesn't matter to me what my mother thought. You know what I mean? Even though part of me says, yes, it does, because I wanted her love and I wanted her affection and I wanted her to love me. But she can't. And she's 16 years in the grave, and would she, even if she was here? No. So I'll never be able to change that. So I thought about that, and I thought, well, instead of, sitting around crying the blues about that, what I need to do is learn how to love myself. I need to become that nurturing parent. I need to become the one that nurtures and loves my inner child and loves myself like a mother would, and take care of myself. And so that's what I'm working on. And we can say things like, he's got here, my value and worth are increased by everything I do. We read that one out. All my experiences are opportunities to gain more power, clarity, and vision. I've heard that one before. I can fill all my needs if I am willing to pay the price. I have a right to ask for and expect something in life. Comparison of myself with another is meaningless. These are just positive affirmations we can say. It's a matter of changing how we feel about ourselves. So, like 4 years ago when I started my healing journey, I started with these simple, really simple affirmations, positive affirmations, just saying, I do love myself. I do love myself. I am not a bad person. I'm a good person. Things like that. And I would go over them, every day. Anytime a negative thought would pop into my head about myself, I would just sit there and I'd say, no, that's not true. I'm a good person. I do love myself. I did not deserve that abuse. And pretty soon, a flashback would come into my mind. Because, I have flashbacks and whatnot from the abuse that I suffered. And a flashback would pop in and I would just say the same thing. I'd be be like, you did not deserve that. I did not deserve that. That was not my fault, and that was a bad choice, and that does not affect me now. That is in the past, and it does not have to affect me now. That is just a memory from the past, and I did not deserve that. I would actually envision myself holding myself and hugging myself. I actually went through a whole stage and the whole step of this stuff. Where I got a lot of that from was the Child Abuse Survivor Monument. Michael C. Irving has got a great website. Michael C. Irving is like a psychotherapist. He's also a survivor himself. And he's got, if you look up irvingstudios.com, or you look up, if you just type in your browser, Child Abuse Survivor Monument, it will come up, and the website will come up. And that's an awesome website. And on there's a whole section of self-help and adult survivor stuff. And if you look in there, there's all kinds of ways to self-soothe. I mean, he's got coping mechanisms. He's got coping lists, really awesome coping lists and things people can do to self-nurture and to learn how to be good to ourselves and to learn how to, because I wasn't held as a child. I wasn't hugged, and I was beaten and thrown around and then told off. And then because I was crying, I was beaten some more, and kicked around. And because my life was so miserable, I always had a bad look on my face, and so I'd come in the room and my mother would beat me because I had a look on my face, and it was generally just because I was in agony from being beaten on and being tortured, So, that was my childhood. I needed some hugs. I needed someone to sit there and read a book with me. I needed someone to just nurture me and rock me and hold me, and I did not get any of that. And so that's why, except for one of my friends, Arlene Griego, I write about her in my book, A Life of Death and Redemption. And she was my best friend, and she sort of took that role on, and we grew up together, and she was like a little sister to me. She lived across the street, a couple houses down, and she took on that role for me from a very young age. And so I got a little bit of that from my friend, but I needed it from my mother, and that's something that I will never be able to get. So I had to learn how to do that myself. And so these self-soothing things, I could actually picture myself, hugging myself, my little child. I would just picture myself, and I still do this. When I'm feeling down or if I'm feeling upset or just something's bothering me, I just picture myself hugging her because she needs hugs, my inner child, that person that I was so long ago. That I can't change the past. I can't go back and change that. But what I can do is learn how to love myself and to really take care of myself. So I started to learn how to hold her hand and I actually would hold my own hand, because for a while I was by myself and I was really on my own and didn't have any support really because I wasn't really reaching out when I first got on my healing journey. And 4 years ago, and I would hold my own hand because I wanted to kill myself. I wasn't suicidal, but I had always had suicidal tendencies. And I talk about that a lot, but that's just because that's the way I grew up. And my mother was suicidal, my dad was suicidal. My dad was actually always trying to kill himself, but my brother committed suicide. Suicide was in our family, and it seemed like an option to me. So 4 years ago, I decided that was not an option, and that it would never ever be an option. And I made a commitment to myself. And at that point, that's when I started my healing journey. Was that I decided I wasn't going to self-sabotage. I was not going to self-injure. I was going to allow myself to get help and get and to heal. Just allow myself to heal. I said, man, why do I have to be destroyed by this? Why do I have to have a violent death? Why do I have to end up, destroyed and miserable just to show what happened to me as a child? Sure, I have a lot of pain inside. This was 4 years ago, and I thought, but why do I have to hurt myself in order to show that? I said, this is ridiculous. I was just basically allowing my parents to win the fight, and to continue this destruction, right? So I thought, no. This is. I started to see it for what it really was, and I said, there's no more of that, So I started to learn how to self-soothe and self-nurture, and to really change the way I felt about myself, and how that I needed to be supportive to myself as well as look for support outside, So I started to realize that I got to be that person, that the person that actually helps me to get where I need to be. And it's very important. We need to learn how to do this stuff. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. I have some guests in the chat room today, and thanks for being here and spending the time with me. And, check out Robert Burney's webpage is www.joy to me and you, joy, number 2, MEU.com. And that's for people who are listening to the archive. It's a great website. Lots of good stuff. We'll continue on with this tomorrow, and I'll be on at 7 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time. I was a little bit late this morning because I forgot to change the time last night. Sorry about that. But 7 o'clock a.m. tomorrow, we'll just resume and pick up where we left off here Take good care of yourselves. If you need help and you can't cope and there's like nobody around, quite often that's the case. You make sure you phone a crisis line. I don't care. I made a commitment to myself that if I couldn't cope and I couldn't do this, I would phone a crisis line. There's no way that I'm going to allow myself to be destroyed and to destroy myself because of what I went through as a child. So you make sure that you get some help. Don't allow yourself to suffer on and not get any help. If you need to reach out, you make sure that you do. I know, if you're fine doing self-help, well, that's fine. But otherwise, there's no shame in reaching out. The shame really doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the abusers and the people that hurt us. And so we need to allow ourselves to feel free to get help, and to stick around, because there's better days ahead. So, but sometimes we don't see that. But that's what I'm saying. If you can't cope, you call a crisis line. You do whatever you do what you have to do. But you stick around and make sure you get some help. Have a great day, everybody. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.